Hey buddy, it's Charles, Side by Side Garage. On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to mount a 35-inch Maxxis Roxxzilla tire on a 15-inch Raceline double beadlock. All right, what we have here is a Raceline 15x7 Ripper double beadlock wheel. Whenever you order this up, it comes with your wheel hoop, a Schrader valve, your center mounting plate, 2 beadlock rings, and the mounting hardware. The mounting hardware that came with this is 5/16 grade 8, and something that's really nice is that the washers are actually captured on the bolt, so you don't have to worry about losing those or anything. This wheel comes with a lot of really cool features. One of the nice features is that the room on the mounting surface right here for your lug nuts on your wheel studs is nice and open, so you can actually reuse your stock style lug nuts on there with your 3/4 or 19mm socket. You can even fit the impact socket on there still. That means you don't have to convert over to these spline drive lug nuts like you do on a lot of aftermarket wheels. So that's one really nice feature. Because these Raceline double beadlocks are 2-piece wheels, it opens up a lot of options for you. For example, this center piece right here could be interchanged for a lot of different reasons. Raceline actually has a couple different styles, so you could swap this out with the other style that they have if you just wanted to change up the look a little bit. You could also powder coat just the center section here. That would give you a different look. Something else that's nice is that they have all these center pieces in different bolt patterns. So let's say you sold your Razor and went over to an X3 or something like that. You could just replace this center part of the wheel. You don't have to go out and spend all that money on an entirely new set of wheels. Something else that's really nice is that these pieces are all separate and bolt together, so if you damaged part of it, you can easily replace just the part that's damaged. The last thing that I really like is that this wheel right here is reversible. So you can actually put it in this side of the wheel or flip it over and put it in the other side, and what that does is it changes the offset or the backspacing. So real quick, let's discuss what is offset and what is backspace. So real fast, wheel offset is actually measured from the center line of the wheel. So you can imagine a center line plane right here in your wheel to the wheel mounting surface, which is right here. If this wheel mounting surface is further out than center line, so that means this wheel mounting surface is further away from the vehicle, so your tire is actually closer to the vehicle, that's what's known as positive offset. If it's the other way, if this wheel mounting surface right here is below that center line plane, which means your tire is further out, so it gives you a wider stance, that's what's known as negative offset. Another way that wheels are measured is called backspacing. Backspacing is way simpler. All backspacing is from the plane that the wheel would sit on. For example, this plane right here of the table measured up to the wheel mounting surface right now. That's what's known as backspacing. This wheel can be set up in 2 different configurations so that it changes your offset or backspacing. The way it is shown here, the total width of this wheel measured from outer beadlock ring to outer beadlock ring is 8.3 inches. That gives you a 5-inch backspace. So it would be like a 5/3.3 whenever you think about guys talking about wheels and they say like, oh, it's a 4.3 wheel, it's a 5.2 wheel, things like that. And that comes out to a 0.85 positive offset. That means this mounting surface is further away from that center line plane of the wheel. If you were to unbolt this centerpiece, flip the wheel over, and then bolt it into the other side, it's actually going to give you 2.28 inches of backspace. So it would be a 2.28/6.02. Another way to look at that is negative 1.87 offset, which means that this wheel mounting surface would be closer to the vehicle. So the rest of your wheel and tire is actually further out because that is a negative offset. Some perks of having more positive offset is that it's actually going to help you steer better because you're going to have a better scrub radius. It's also going to increase the life of your steering components because you don't have as much leverage further out from the vehicle, so it's going to increase the life on your wheel bearings, as well as the rest of your steering components. Another nice thing about having more positive offset is that it keeps you thinner, so those guys that are like East Coast or wooded trails, you're not going to be as wide. This wheel right here, a lot of guys wonder, will this fit on a portal car? The answer is yes. I ran this wheel with more positive offset, which means it's the way it sits right now, on my 17 Razor Turbo with 4-inch portals, and it did clear the portal box in the bracket. You just have to make sure that you tuck your brake lines out of the way nice and neat, otherwise you could risk the brake line rubbing on the wheel. Now what about if you want to run more negative offset on your wheel? The perks of having more negative offset, so that means the tire is going to be further away, is that your vehicle is going to be wider. The wider it is, the more stable it is in cornering and off-camber situations. Another perk of it is that, let's say during sharp corners you were rubbing your wheel on suspension components. You could flip over to the other offset, run that negative offset, bring that wheel and tire away from those components so you no longer rub. The bad news about running a lot of negative offset is that it's a lot harder on your components. So your wheel bearings are going to go out a lot faster. You have more leverage. So if you're running heim joints, your ball joints, all that stuff is going to see increased wear, so reduced life. All right, once you've chosen which offset you want to run, what you're going to do first is actually take this wheel mounting flange and you're going to put it down inside the wheel. You're going to actually line up this portion right here with your Schrader valve. Now, something you need to take note of is the way these little capture nuts are, because these are actually pressed into this wheel right here. So whenever you put the wheel flange down in there, you actually need to use the set not like this, but that is actually on the other side. And the reason why, like you can see on these, is that there's actually a little flange on there. So if you were to use these whenever you're on this side, it would actually try to pull that fastener out of the aluminum. But if you use the other ones, that flange keeps it from being able to pull through the wheel. So what you can do is set your flange down inside of here. You insert all of your bolts, and then you're going to torque these in a star pattern, 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Real fast right here, I have a wheel and tire that I've already mounted up and assembled. I just wanted to show you. So you can see that because this wheel is mounted so that it has the positive offset, you're going to have 3 open bolt holes. That's because of those little nuts that are captured right here on this side. So you have to skip over those. You can't use that one because of the Schrader valve. So you use the next one, and then you put a bolt in every other bolt hole. If this mounting flange was on the other side so that it actually had the negative offset, then I would be utilizing these 2 bolt holes and then every other one. All right, the tire that I'm going to be mounting on my Raceline double beadlocks is going to be a Maxxis Roxxzilla. This is a 35-10-15. They just recently came out with this. They've had the 35-10-14 for a while now. This has proven to be a great rock tire as far as the reviews out there go. I personally have not ran it, so I can't say it is a great rock tire in my opinion. But I think that it's going to be. This is a radial construction. As you can see, it's got some pretty massive side lugs on it. And then there's also some really nice siping along the center portion of the tread up there. So I have a feeling it's going to do really good on like the slick rock, the granite rock, trails like Rubicon Trail, Fordyce Trail that I go on to a lot. This tire is extremely soft. This is a competition compound. You can tell whenever you just grab onto the lugs and bend them, they're very, very squishy. So as far as what you want to use this tire on, I recommend you don't use this tire on road driving, things like that. If you have to take a lot of paved roads to the trail, I do not recommend this tire. For the rocks, I'm going to probably recommend this tire, but I'll have a review on it later. I was curious just how soft this tire was. So what we ended up doing was set one tire inside here. It's been 80 degrees inside the shop. We set another tire outside, and we took temperatures with a little laser gun here. And the tire inside here at 80 degrees ended up reading an average of about 48 on the durometer. And that was measuring all the side lugs and the center lugs on the tire tread. The tire that we had outside measured 130 degrees, and when we checked it with a durometer, it was averaging right around 36. So that's extremely soft for a tire. The next thing we're going to do is actually get this mounted on the wheel. One thing you got to check out whenever you're going to mount tires on a wheel is see if they're actually directional. This tire is directional. It has a little arrow right here and it says rotation this way, which is counterclockwise looking down from the top right now. So whenever I mount my wheel, I'm going to mount it down in like this so that the outside is right here. And the reason why is because I've already mounted up both passenger side tires and wheels and one of my driver's side tires and wheels. So I got to mount the other one up. So that means the face of the wheel you're going to see needs to be on this side. So real fast before I actually start mounting this wheel in the tire, I was going to talk to you real fast about this. It's called a dismount or mounting bar, also known as a tire spoon. You can use these, although I do not recommend it. If you use a little finesse, use a little lube and a little bit of muscle, you can actually get the wheels mounted without using one of these, and that way you don't risk damaging your wheel. To lubricate the tire to put the wheel in there, I typically just use Windex because it ends up dissolving away. You don't have to worry about it, and it works really well. So the first thing I'm going to do, make sure I got the tire mounted or orientated the correct direction with the rotation, and then spray a little Windex on there. For a single beadlock wheel, you only have to get one side of the wheel down inside the tire. Since this is a double beadlock, I actually have to get this entire wheel on the inside of the tire. The first thing that I'm going to do is just get half of it in there. Once you get the first half of the wheel in there, next thing I like to do is just try to twist the wheel so I can get the bottom lip there started, and then usually you can kind of maneuver the wheel down inside the tire. All right, now you can see that the wheel is on the inside of the tire here, as well as on this backside. All right, now that I got the wheel on the inside of the tire, I've set it up on top of a stool. This is just a little round stool sitting underneath there. It's nice because I can spin it and move the tire around to work on it. The next thing you got to do is actually get this part of the tire down on the bead mounting surface all the way around the wheel. So to do that, you just got to kind of work it around really. There we go. Now that the tire is down on the wheel, you can come in with your beadlock ring. And what I like to do is actually start 4 bolts in the ring first. And you always start off your bolts with your hand. You never throw an impact on them or anything like that, otherwise you risk stripping them out. So I just have this socket right here to help me twist them. And what I'm going to actually do is put 4 of them across from each other, and then I'm going to get these cinched down on there a little bit. And then I have to make sure that this tire is actually centered on the wheel. All right, we've just got 4 bolts in here, and I had to adjust the beadlock ring just a little bit, but you can see now that this little rubber line on the tire and this edge of the beadlock ring right there. So you can actually use that as a guide to make sure you get the beadlock ring centered on the tire. Now that it's centered on there, I'm going to go around, add the rest of the bolts, and I'm going to get them snug down in there. I'm not going to torque them yet. I'm just going to snug them up. Now, whenever it comes to mounting beadlock rings and the use of impact, that is all personal preference. I use them. As long as you are careful with them, then you're not going to damage anything. You want to make sure that you use one that's not putting down a ton of torque, and you're not actually going to be torquing these beadlock rings with this. All we're doing with this is speeding up the process, getting the bolts sucked down on here. You're actually going to come back afterwards with a torque wrench still to tighten down all of your beadlock ring bolts. Now that I've got all the bolts started, I'm going to come in with this little mini impact. Now remember, we're not actually going to be counting off ugga-duggas here or nothing like that. We're only going to be snugging these bolts up. And what I like to do is actually get one side snugged up and then flip this tire and wheel over and do the other side before I actually come in and torque these bolts down to spec. Whenever you're torquing down these bolts, you need to make sure that you use a star pattern. For example, midnight, 6, 9, and 3. Now that all the bolts are just snugged down, let's flip it over. When it's flipped over, you got to repeat the same process of making sure that this tire is down on the bead mounting surface. After that, you can come in with your beadlock ring. Again, start off with 4 bolts just to make sure that you get them snugged down and get this beadlock ring centered on this tire. Now that we have all the bolts snugged down, I'm going to come in with a torque wrench. Now, I'm going to show you real fast that even though I hit all those with that mini impact, I didn't actually overdo it in the risk stripping those out. You can see right there, that's only 2 foot-pounds on that torque wrench right now. These bolts call for 12 to 14 foot-pounds according to Raceline's website. And that's the same thing with those other bolts that mount that center wheel mounting piece down here. So what we're going to actually do is go back again, just like before with the star pattern, and we're going to torque these to that 12 to 14 foot-pounds. Now, whenever you're torquing these, you need to make sure that you do a minimum of 3 times around the beadlock ring. And the reason why that is because whenever you torque this right here, say this bolt to 12 to 14 foot-pounds, by the time you've torqued the ones next to it, if you were to go back and check that bolt, it's no longer holding 12 to 14 foot-pounds because this beadlock ring's aluminum and it actually flexes. So as you tighten the fasteners next to it, the load on the previous fastener changes. All right, I've went around this thing now probably 4 or 5 times at least. The reasons why you also go around multiple times is not just to ensure that you get an even torque on all these bolts, but also that star pattern, it's hard to keep on top of it to make sure that you're catching every single bolt and you might miss one. So by going around multiple times, it ensures that you got all the bolts. What I like to do is actually go back when I'm done and I'll just check every single bolt one after the other to make sure that they're within the torque spec. As long as you torque these bolts down to spec and you actually do the alternating patterns back and forth and you do multiple times around there, that ensures that one, this beadlock does not actually leak air. Out of probably 20 plus sets that I've mounted, I've never had a beadlock wheel leak air. And then it also ensures that this tire is not able to shift around any on that bead mounting surface. It stays nice and solid. So now that we got this side done, we can actually flip this over and torque the other side that we skipped earlier. All right, now that we finished torquing down the bolts on this side of the wheel, we can actually add air to this tire. Now, whenever you're putting air into a single beadlock or a non-beadlock wheel for the first time, you actually have to put enough air in there to seat the bead. I like to use Windex in that same scenario because it helps the tire get lubed up and slip over onto the bead. There is a max PSI that you don't want to exceed whenever you're setting the bead, and it's always listed on the tire. In the case of this Roxxzilla, it looks like it's 36 PSI listed right here. Something you also have to keep in mind is you don't want to exceed the max PSI for the wheel itself. According to Raceline's instructions, this wheel cannot exceed 25 PSI. The max operating PSI for this tire is listed over here as 18 PSI. With this being a double beadlock wheel, we don't have to set a bead. All you got to do is add air to it. Me, I'm going to go ahead and put the max PSI of 18 into the tire, because I'm actually going to check the height of the tire and see if it's a true 35. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less. All right, we've got the air in the tire. Now real fast, I was curious what the height of this tire was, so I went ahead and threw a square on it. Now we actually put this square down on the floor, on the concrete floor, on all the tires, and we took multiple measurements because we wanted to see what the average height was out of this tire. It turns out that this Maxxis Roxxzilla 35, 10, 15, when mounted on a Raceline 15x7 double beadlock Ripper wheel, is a true 35. You can see right here it's coming out right at the 35 inches. The reason we actually measure these wheels and tires off of the vehicle to see the height, and we also measure them at max PSI, is because whenever you try to measure a tire and wheel on the vehicle, you're going to get a completely different measurement. For example, this is a 35 BFG. Whether or not it measures a true 35, I don't know, but you can see right now it does not measure 35 inches. Now, there's a lot of things you have to factor in. One is the weight of the vehicle is going to cause a flat spot down here. Another is that this is not at max PSI. This is only at probably 8 to 10 PSI, what I usually run on the trail on this tire. Another thing that's going to change the height of the tire is the wheel that it's sitting on. This is a completely different wheel, so the wider or thinner that wheel is, it's going to change the height of the tire. I know a lot of you are probably curious what this combination weighs. This Raceline double beadlock weighs 23 pounds. The Roxxzilla 35, 10, 15 weighs 53 pounds. So together, this weighs 76 pounds. The next thing we're going to do is actually get these mounted on the razor real fast so we can get out of the shop, take a look at it. All right, that's going to do it for this video. You can see we got our 35-inch Roxxzillas up on our Raceline double beadlocks. Hopefully I'll get to test them out soon. I'll make sure and give you guys a full review on the tires. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We'll catch you next time.